Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Foxy and this is Foxy Books and Planning. Today is the first of my reading wrap-up slash future book reading plans videos. So the way this is going to work is I'm going to do this video once a month, and my goal is to post it on the 25th of the month. So right before the end of the month, so I'll have enough time to kind of coalesce all the things I've finished, all the things I'm currently reading, and the things that I'm targeting for the next month, and get it out to y'all in time so that you can see what I read this month and what I'm hoping to read for next month. And some of the books and things will be the same from month to month because I tend to do a lot of books at the same time, depending on what I feel like reading. And so things take me longer to finish depending on how I'm reading or what I'm interested in reading and finishing that month. So 3 parts to this video. The first part is going to be what I finished this month. The second part is going to be what books I'm currently working on for the month, or currently in progress. It doesn't matter when I started them, as long as I haven't finished them by the 25th of August, they will be in this list. And then the final section is the what's on deck for next month. And by on deck, I mean my plan for this is to pick an audiobook and a physical book or ebook that I'm targeting for the next up when I finish something, or when I'm looking for something to read. This is the book that I'm going to try next. And so with that, let's get into it. All right, so books I finished this month. It was a pretty good month. I wasn't as distracted in terms of my reading as I was the previous month. I did a lot more music listening last month. So the books I finished, I'm just going to go down the list I have written on my off-camera little reminder sheet. And I'm going to tell you what they are, what format I read them in, and what my general thoughts on them were. Not full reviews, just stars and whether or not I would recommend them. The first on my list is We Are Legion, We Are Bob by Dennis E. Taylor. I read this as an audiobook. I believe it is an Audible specific audiobook. Yes. And I gave it 5 stars. Quick little overview. It's a science fiction book in which we're following Bob, who is a replicant, which in the book's world is the term for a human mind that has been put into a machine, and he has been tasked with essentially saving the human race. And it's a really interesting, really fun book. It was recommended to me by my dad, who really enjoys it. It's kind of one of those, if you threw every single science fiction trope into a single book, or trilogy in this case. I just finished the first book this month. It's that. Every single science fiction trope, every single reference you can think of is made in this book at some point. And again, 5 stars. The next book was 2001: A Space Odyssey by Arthur C. Clarke. So this is kind of a weird one because if you know anything about 2001: A Space Odyssey, Arthur C. Clarke and Stanley Kubrick developed the story together. And so the book and the movie were developed in tandem. And the book goes into more detail about certain elements of the movie that might not make sense if you're just viewing it the first time. I really enjoyed it as a science fiction nerd and somebody who really loved the film. I gave it 5 stars. I did listen to it as an audiobook, but it's a really short book, so it shouldn't be too terribly difficult to read it as a paperback. And I also really appreciated the version of the audiobook I read had a author's note by Arthur C. Clarke that talked about how the book was how the story was developed with Stanley Kubrick. The next one is Fangs of Freelance, which is Fred the Vampire Accountant Book 4 by Drew Hayes. I listened to this as an audiobook, 5-star review. This one to me is actually one of the better books in the Fred the Vampire Accountant. Most of them get 4 or 5 stars out of me. The first couple got 4s mainly because they all end with a Deus Ex Machina type ending where some kind of big secret is revealed that solves all the problems. And this one didn't have that, and I really enjoyed that. Next one, another Drew Hayes book. This is The Case of the Damaged Detective by Drew Hayes. It is an Audible original audiobook. It is not available in any other format other than an Audible audiobook. I gave it 5 stars. It's kind of the way my spouse and I described it, because my spouse actually read it first and recommended it to me, is take the Sherlock TV series with Benedict Cumberbatch and Martin Freeman and make Benedict Cumberbatch a potentially insane science experiment and make Watson a detective for a 3-letter agency. Or not a detective, a spy for a 3-letter agency. And it's one where the Watson character is having to transport the Sherlock Holmes character, who goes by Sherman in this, across the country from one secret research facility to the other. And the Sherman Holmes is pretty much an idiot most of the time, or the things he says don't make sense, but he has the ability to unlock a 5-minute window in which he becomes Sherlock Holmes for 5 minutes. And it was a really, really fun audiobook. All right, the next one is Rivals, Frenemies Who Changed the World by Scott McCormick. This was an Audible free original. So for those of you who don't know, Audible, with their memberships, depending on your membership level, but you get 2 free Audible originals a month out of a curated 5 Audible original list. And normally those Audible originals range from like 30 minutes to a couple of hours, depending. The best value I've seen so far is this month, a Audible Originals full voice cast production of Treasure Island was one of the free ones, which is a 6.5-hour audiobook, which normally goes between $15 and $20, was free, but most of them 2 or 3 hour kind of quick reads. So this one, it looks at 3 famous rivalries. 3? Yeah, no, 3. 3 famous rivalries and how they kind of affected history. And I really thought they were fun. I thought that with some of them, there was a lot of kind of humor put into them, but I'm not going to go into that. I gave it 4 stars. The 3 rivalries they looked at were the Bone Wars of the late 19th century, the war between Adidas and Puma, and Mary Queen of Scots versus Queen Elizabeth. And then my last one, which I just finished, is Going Postal by Terry Pratchett. This is an audiobook. It's a 5-star. It's like the 5th or 6th time I've reread it. It's the 33rd Discworld novel, but it's the first of the Moist von Lipwig trilogy, which the Moist von Lipwig trilogy is probably among my favorites of the Discworld books I've read, just because Moist is kind of a hilarious character. But it was a reread. I wanted something kind of light and simple I didn't have to pay attention to. And that kind of gets it for me. So that was everything I finished in the month of August. All right, so on to the in-progress books. So the first thing I have on my in-progress is Recursion by Blake Crouch, which I'm listening to as an audiobook. I started reading this because the company I'm currently working at has an online book club through their Yammer, where the collective brain picks a book for the month, read the book, and then you can discuss it on the chat. And so this was the book that was picked for this month, and since I'm trying to get involved, I figured I might as well give it a go. And Recursion sounded like an interesting book. There's a lot of discussion of memory and time loops and that kind of stuff. And I'm at about 50% right now in terms of completing it. I'll probably have it completed in the next week or 2. I'm finding it interesting, but I'm also finding certain elements of the book kind of confusing, in that the book was kind of billed to me as a thriller, and I don't find it very thrillery. It's very kind of sci-fi, but I'm not quite sure what we're driving towards in terms of what the actual plot is. And we'll leave it at that. I'll tell you what I think about it in next month's wrap up. The next one is Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. I have this as an ebook from the library right now. I'm only 8% of the way in, but it's a book that I've really been looking forward to reading, and I couldn't believe I could get it from the library for no wait time as an ebook. And it's about a main character with OCD, and that's about all I know about it. Because basically in the first 8%, I've been introduced to the character, and I really haven't gotten that much into it. The next one, I actually have the book with me. So it's a physical book. Is The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton. I'm 17% through it, so my bookmark, my receipt for the book is here that I'm using as a bookmark. I'm really enjoying this book. It's the book I'm currently reading before I go to bed. The general idea of this is that we have a main character who knows nothing about themselves. We don't know what their name is, what their gender is, anything. But he's been told, or I'm assuming it's a he right now, but we don't know what the gender or anything about this main character is that they are being tasked with solving a riddle. And what's going to happen to them is that each day they're going to be put in the body of a different guest at a party at a British manor house in the country. And they have 7 days, or 7 body hops, depending on how you look at it, to figure out what the riddle is. And by the title, it's probably that Evelyn Hardcastle is murdered. And so you have to figure out, or the main character's having to figure out who murdered Evelyn by the end of the 7 days. And I'm really, really enjoying it. I really like the ambiguousness of the main character. I like the body hopping. I like the main, or not the main character, the taskmaster, I'll call them. And I'm really engaged to kind of finish this quickly because I'm really excited for it. All right. The next in progress, it's technically not a book, but I'm reading it or listening to it as an audiobook or audio media, is The Great Courses History of Science, Antiquity to 1700 with the lecturer Lawrence M. Princip, excuse me. I'm 48% of the way through the course. This is through Audible. I really am enjoying this. It's something I've had in my Audible library for a while, and I'm just getting around to reading it or listening to it. And I find it really fascinating, and I appreciate how Dr. Princip takes the time to look at multiple parts of the world where he'll say, okay, now next lecture, we're going to leave the Latin list and we're going to go somewhere else. And it's the most fascinating listening in a while. My next one is a physical book, but unfortunately it's in my desk at work right now. I don't have it with me. Is Kingsbane by Claire Legrand, which is the second Furyborn book. I'm about 42% of the way through that one. That one is a little bit harder for me to get through. I really enjoyed Furyborn when I read it last year when it came out. The one thing that irritated me about Furyborn when I read it was that every chapter ends on a cliffhanger, or they're not exactly cliffhangers, but they end on things where it's like, now I have to keep reading to get to the next chapter to see what happens. And the chapters alternate between our two main characters, Riel, who is the original Sun Queen, and Eliana, who is her daughter, who's living thousands of years in the future. And I won't go into any spoilers for those of you who haven't read Furyborn yet. But I'm reading it at lunch, so I'm only getting about 10 or 20 pages in a lunch period. and it's really hard for me to get through because it's not as interesting to me as Furyborn, because Furyborn was just thing after thing after thing after thing, and Kingsbane, it feels like it should be thing after thing after thing after thing, but one storyline has a lot of stuff happening and the other storyline doesn't have a lot. So I'm like, did we really need to alternate people each chapter? When we could have just stuck with this person until something happened in the other person's story or whatever. And then my next one is History of Heart of Empire, A History of the Holy Roman Empire by Peter Wilson. It's an audiobook. It's a slog of an audiobook. I'm at 33%, and that's like 12 hours in. So it's like a 48-hour audiobook or something. This is one that I listen to if I want something kind of educational, but something that I don't have to pay as great attention to detail on, because it's history, and so it's very much like Think A, Think B, Think C, and the narrator has a very dulcet, tony type of voice where it's easy to listen to. So that one's probably gonna take me a while to finish, because that's one I go to if I've run out of things on my phone to listen to when I'm driving, or if I'm doing a much longer trip. But so there's that. My last book that I'm currently reading is one I started today while I was doing my driving, which is Even Tree Nymphs Get the Blues by Molly Harper. It was an Audible free original when I purchased it, and I'm 60% of the way through it. It's a novella related to her Mystic Bayou romance series. I bought it for free because it was one of the free originals a couple months ago. And it's a fun little romp. It kind of makes me want to see what her other romance novels are like, and I'm not a big romance novel reader, but it might be her romance novels might be like the right kind of fluff to read in between some of these bigger, heavier books that I've been reading. All right. And now it is time for what is on deck for reading next month. So with this, I'm going to try and stick to 2 items on deck. And so I'll pick one audiobook and one physical book that are on deck. And so to start with, let's go with the audiobook. My audiobook on deck is The Beholder by Anna Bright. I'm borrowing this from the library, and my loan should become available in the next couple of days. At least that's what Libby is telling me. And it's an alternate history YA novel, and it's the debut novel for Anna Bright. And I remember hearing some good things on BookTube about it, so I'm going to check it out and see what I think when my loan comes through. And then my last one is A Spell for Chameleon by Pierce Anthony, which is the first Xanth novel. This is one of my 100 best science fiction and fantasy novels. I know nothing about it, other than I believe the world kind of looks like Florida. I can find the map. Yeah, the map. It's a Florida-like world. It'll be interesting. I tried starting it once, but I didn't get very far, so I'm just gonna start it again. It shouldn't take me too long. It's one of those classic high fantasy novels, so we'll see how it goes. And with that, that's all I had to share with you for the month of August and my 2 books that are on deck for September. And with that, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please let me know what your thoughts on any of the books I talked about briefly down below. Let me know what you're reading this month, or any of the your favorites you finished from the last month. And I will see you next month for the September-October video. As always, please like and subscribe, and I hope to see you soon. Talk to you soon. Bye.